So, welcome everyone to the seventh session in the Becoming Regenerative Series. Glad to see a lot of familiar faces and some new, and just a couple of reminders about the notion of the work. This is participatory work, right? In order to it's not something you just show up for and listen to and glean knowledge and information from. So we encourage you to actively participate in the session today. So it's not like a passive learning sort of experience. Um, at the same time, what I'd encourage you to do as we work a lot with frameworks. I'd encourage you to treat all of this kind of lightly. Don't expect to absorb everything all at once. So treat it lightly and playfully and have fun with it. All right. So we're going to get started with an opening exercise. And I'm going to share my screen. So we're going to start today with a bit of a journaling exercise. And the piece that I want to bring in here to sort of set this up again, I think very lightly, is this notion of binocular vision. Gregory Bateson made reference to this as an important aspect of being able to think and see regeneratively. So the notion of binocular vision, right, gives us literally, right, our depth perception by combining distinct overlapping perspectives that yield new insight, right? Each of our eyes sees something slightly different. And the premise is that you need those perspectives because a single point of view, right, can never achieve the same level of insight. And so, what we'd like to invite you to do is take about 5 minutes and just journal related to these questions, whatever's coming up for you. Um, you can apply it if that to something that's going on in your work or your life, if that's helpful for you. But there's a few questions we have here. What's the value of seeing through multiple lenses, multiple perspectives? What is the regenerative effect of doing so? And we're using the term effect. If those of you that have done any reading of Carol Sanford, she uses this word effectiveness, right, to bring in the emotional response, not just the kind of cold, hard effect. So, what's the regenerative effect of doing that? And what capacities are required for us to do this and do it in better ways? Any questions? And I can dump this in the chat so I can take it off the screen. All right, let's take about 5 minutes. Right. I felt like I could keep going on this and generate some new stuff, but curious what's coming up for folks. What did you notice as you went through this? What was really jumping out at you?
I can share. Um, I kept moving things between the value and the affect because those felt sort of synonymous to me. But
Mm,
the the value or effect can be, it changes the nature of the issue or the problem you're trying to solve often. Um, you think you're working on one thing, and when you get multiple perspectives, things tend to morph and evolve in a way that is you didn't um, anticipate. And
mm,
there's the value in that is that you're identifying the right issue, which is like 75% of the the way
right.
towards solving it.
Yeah. Yeah, Einstein said once, right? If you give him an hour to solve a problem, he'll spend 55 minutes coming up with the right question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that feels right.
Great. So I think I want to invite others in, but I'm curious about you mentioning the fact that you didn't necessarily distinguish much, if any, difference between value and effect.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that.
Well, you sort of equated affect with the like emotional experience of,
Right.
the people. And I guess to me, value is in the emotional effect of the people. So
Hmm.
people feel seen, heard, included. People feel
Right.
valued. Um, so maybe that's just how I'm understanding the value in a particular way, is the impact on the humans.
Yeah, I can see the connection that you're bringing. It's just, maybe something to think about, trying
Yeah.
to unpack for yourself.
I was trying to not, I tend to think about value as like outcomes and
Mm.
probably more of the effect, right? I
Right.
wrote, you get to a more holistic, cohesive, and enduring outcome, when you look through multiple perspectives. And then I felt like I was like, oh, that feels too outcome driven and
Mm.
effect driven.
Yeah.
I actually in the uh, indirect work, Carl Sanford goes through the effect and outcome and slices those um, specifically. So that's a good read if you have not done so. Um, I was I also I had not done the exercise um, since we came together, and I wanted to point out that the by doing the binocular vision, we can open up um, shared shared commonalities between opposing and polarized views, and those uncovering those shared commonalities can then be used for reconciliation in times where we, like the one we're living now, that we see, growing wars and antagonisms and all those things. So it's we'll step further into that on the next exercise, but that's what it came up to me as I was doing it.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I think and piggyback on your question, Marcus, as well, about how I distinguish between those. I think between value and effect, and I think effect for me was about, so value is seeing different perspectives, hearing different perspectives, seeing, as you said, Danielle, the nature of the problem or the topic or the question potentially or likely changing. And the regenerative affect, I put down sort of this. What was really interesting, what was coming up for me was Nora Bateson's combining, probably because I'm reading that right now, and just the sense of interconnectedness, and that as a felt experience. That when I'm hearing other people's perspectives, it's typically based on lived experience that I can't have any ability to understand because mine lived experience is mine. And so to hear that from others is to feel it too. I feel it as well. And so that opens me up to possibilities and understanding that I may not have otherwise had.
Yeah, that's interesting. I noticed that I was the second question and the third were kind of conflated for me. Right. So when I was thinking about affected, I was going to the capacities that are needed. Right.
Mm. Yeah, I started writing those as I was writing regenerative effect. I was thinking I started writing capacities as well.
Right.
And I put down Ben, I think it's Ben Haggett that says cheerfully ignorant, right? Just the curiosity and
Right.
non-attachment to your own position or perspective. And open to emergence, I put down as well.
Right. Right. So what else was coming up for folks, especially maybe on that third question?
For me, I mean, I saw this very much as a personal thing rather, but then I noticed you required of us. Now, whether you're directing at individuals or as groups or whatever, but that's the way I was taking it. Yeah, I think like some of you, I flip between all of those. Um, the capacities I am beginning to find through projects I'm working on is very much about patience and time. The the time and putting in the time and the effort to be able to listen deeply to people, to care and to withhold judgment as well. And I think that's could be a real um, that's a concern sometimes of you've got a project. I think Danielle, you're alluding to this. So you have a project in mind and then you start talking to people and things and then finding out actually that's not really the project you should be working on, you know. And so how much emotional attachment do you have to that project? Are you driven by the project or the place or the system you're wanting to work on? So I think that's what came up for me there around that particular question. And yeah, that change of focus on action is it, are you, is this dawning sense of, oh my God, I'm doing the wrong, I'm totally in the wrong direction here. Um, or, I should be putting my effort into some other aspect there, which I perhaps don't feel the capacity for, or capability perhaps is perhaps more correct term.
Great. Anything else?
As I would just briefly add, what's coming up for me as I listen to everybody is, I mean, I was thinking about, right, how kind of the recognition, the capacity to recognize any singular perspective is limited. And then I was thinking about, okay, um, the value of integrating multiple perspectives and how that's required to develop understanding. And then this question around affect, I think the experience of wholeness was coming up for me,
Yeah.
right? So and then how that relates to the process of developing understanding. So that as our understanding evolves, we experience more and more of this sense of wholeness. And then kind of relating that back to capacity in terms of, right, we can think about external considering, for example, how that wholeness expands. That sense of wholeness expands as our understanding of kind of the world, ourselves in place expands. So that's kind of what was shifting for me a little bit.
Great. Well, we're going to keep playing with this. And so we've got, I think, an exercise that Miguel's going to walk us through, and we'll put you in breakouts and keep exploring.
So we did the journaling exercise individually, and then now we're going to move to the first exercise, which we're going to do in pairs. So what we're trying to do here is engage that binocular vision. So we're going to try to bring to mind somebody that you're currently in relationship with, maybe having difficulties with, and then ask yourself, what larger living system is this individual an expression of? So kind of nested. And if we're looking through the relationships, flows, histories, places, and reciprocal effects that shape them, what greater whole or larger system would become visible that you have not been seeing? So that is the framing. And then we have some breakout questions, and we'll give you 10 minutes. Let me uh, share here on the chat the questions, and Marcus shared it on the screen so you can screen capture or look at the chat. And again, you'll have like 10 minutes for this breakout.
So, Miguel, to give us even numbers in pairs, I put you in a breakout, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
All right. Everybody ready? Here you go. Whoop. Timer's off. Ignore it. Welcome back, everyone.
How did that feel?
It felt a little frustrating for me because
Mm.
I'm trying to understand someone else's perspective without actually hearing directly from them what their perspective is. I
Mhm.
think is where I came to in our chat, Tony, that we can sort of hypothesize what their perspective is, but if that person's not willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, then I need to find different ways to keep potentially either keep putting the invitation out or letting go.
Yeah, and then that's what I kind of brought up the importance. So there's nothing shared, or if you're ha struggling to find something shared that can act as a opening, then it's difficult. And um, so most likely that person is stuck in their one eye vision and is refusing to acknowledge anything else.
And
Um,
protecting, I think there's a protection, a belief they're intentionally doing the right thing and protecting something they're part of. So I keep coming back to what can I do to still remain open to the conversation, regardless of whether they want to engage or not. Or how can I
well,
create an invitation that's not, well, that's enticing.
yeah, there's a fear of collapse or a collapse happening, and um, what
Yeah.
is driving that? That's a good question. I also
Can
wanted
I,
to go
yeah,
ahead, Tony.
sorry, I was just going to add to the conversation with Debbie there is what comes to me also is people who perhaps have a strange or inflated sense of responsibility around their involvement with a particular organization, um, and feel threatened perhaps by things, events that are happening that are challenging them. Um, I mean, I've seen this in one or two organizations where trustees violently opposed to, more progressive ideas because, they feel they have this kind of responsibility to the organization, and they're seeing it only in its previous terms rather than an evolving organism, if you like, or part of a bigger system, and therefore sort of retreat into this kind of, you know, linear response to a threat because they feel personally, affected by that.
So, Tony, to that notion, when Marcus and I were designing this session, we intentionally left out the lowest level of energy, which is vital, but uh, based upon what I was talking to Anya and when Terry's mentioning, it feels that some of the people that you guys or the persons that you thought about were dropping down to the vital level of energy. So that collapse on the level of energy then uh, drags along the motor behavior to reaction. So they're pretty much shield up and eh, the space closes. So um, it is important to acknowledge. I mean, again, we did it intentionally because, again, we're working with y'all that have selected to be here and some have worked in the past doing regenerative work. So we kind of assumed that we were going to be starting due to the 1.5 hours, starting from at least from automatic. But yeah, it is important to acknowledge that you can fall down at any given moment in a question of a second.
And I just want to add that that's my challenge is to be not, well, screw you, which is what I want to say, but hold the higher potential of what I see could be benefit to the greater whole. Um, And so to really keep trying, that's really helpful, you naming that, Miguel, for me not to be collapsing to that level. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, Tony also mentioned when you said violent, I didn't know. I've experienced this part too, where there's actually the reconciling comes after the physical violence, but I don't recommend going that way, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it'll be me giving up, not me attacking.
Well, while you were out in the breakout, I was through my single eye, I was doing this exercise, of course. And the one notion that popped out at me was, when we're dealing with other people, so often we're just basing stuff on conjecture and projections, right? Ourselves. So where my thinking went was this notion that our perspective is never complete, right? It's always isolated and limited. Therefore, our opinions are actually never fully formed, right? Because they can always be more informed. And then where the trajectory of my thinking went to what does that say about what we hold deeply as our core beliefs, right? If you kind of project it out. So, anyway, that's where my mind went in this exercise. Yeah.
yeah, the big ego stepping in.
Right.
I've been listening to some of the feedback, excuse me, and also my own example that I held in mind. I feel there's a struggle with we can be working on our, like seeing through different eyes and multiple perspectives. But if the other is not,
Mm.
how do you get them to think that way? And maybe it does come back to their like asking them about their core beliefs, like finding those commonalities so you can start from a place of like, well, if we hold that to be true or like what's motivating us, then can you loosen your grip on your singular perspective
So that,
to the other,
yeah,
bring
no,
them on the same wavelength maybe.
it's actually a great segue to our next exercise, unless unless there's something else begging to be shared. Ready to move on? All right. So I'm just gonna speak real quickly to this. For a couple of you, this might be somewhat new, but for several of you, this is the old familiar. Right? Just we wanted to bring in the law of three into your thinking. Um, and there's one subtle little thing that I wanted to bring in here is the law of three is basically right. You have an activating force and a restraining force, and right, they are butting together quite often. And we ostensibly call that conflict. And then the question is, well, what do you do with that conflict? If you even hold it as conflict. So you can devolve the situation into compromise where everybody loses something, or you can seek this reconciling force, right? And so, Anya, the thing that you're bringing in there is right. How do we introduce this reconciling energy or reconciling force into the situation? And the one thing I want to note about that is you'll notice that the activating and restraining forces tend to be right in existence, right? They're things that are right happening, things that are in that realm of existence. And the reconciling force tends to exist in this realm of potential. So there's this kind of plane that exists in between there. And Miguel was referring to some of the other levels of energy, and I want to bring that in real quick. So, if you're unfamiliar with the levels of energy as a leveling framework, Miguel mentioned vital, We've brought a little bit automatic and sensitive and conscious in here. Above conscious levels, there's creative, unitive, and transcendent. We're not necessarily going to get into all those, but I want to bring the commonality that I'm seeing between the law of three and the levels of energy is somewhere around that conscious level. And, one could debate about the nature of consciousness and whether it's within the plane of existence or not. But it's clearly, right, this hinge between existence and the realm of potential. And so bringing that notion in and kind of combining them, right? With this notion of being able to look at um, issues through multiple perspectives or multiple eyes, right? And how seeing with that single eye versus binocular vision versus bringing in that third force or that third eye, and how that opens up different levels of energy and how that relates to the law of three. So we wanted to bring all that into the next exercise. Um, and I'm going to share, I already put it in the chat. I'm just going to share it quick.
I put it in the chat.
You got it? All right.
Yeah.
So basically, what we want you to do is hold those frameworks in mind as you go through this and bring to mind a situation you're working on. And maybe it's related to this individual you were holding in the previous exercise, or maybe not. Maybe it's something associated with work or some other aspect of your life. And especially, what about that situation have you been treating as a problem to be solved that may be pushing back on or limiting the evolution you're working toward for yourself? And there's a couple other questions to expand upon that in the breakout. So bring to mind um, a particular situation that you're working on and apply it with those questions. Again, since we're going to put you in threes, and again, Miguel, for even numbers, I'm going to put you in there. Any questions? And we're going to give you 15 minutes for this one. So the timer is about right. All right, welcome back. So, the question that was coming up for me while you were in your breakout, I just put it in the chat. So, what's the nature of the force required, related in particular to your individual being state when you honor the restraints and invite reconciling energy? And I want to also bring it back to one of the first questions we asked in the opening is what capacities are required of you to hold it this way? Or whatever else came up in your conversation. Any reflections?
Something that came up in our breakout that Tom reminded us of was that our energy, I guess you said like high meets low to so if they're stuck in vital, but we're working in conscious, maybe we need to raise our level even higher to pull them up to
Mm,
even just automatic, hopefully further, but like starting from that, like how do we show up to the conversation? Not just what we say or do, but just like even the energy that we bring.
mm, yeah. Yeah, there's an adage, and I know I've heard Carol say this, that there's this notion you're supposed to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And it's, you need to meet people at least a level above where they are, is I think what she would say. And I know Miguel refers to this concept of N plus two, right? So Carl would say probably two levels above. There is a caution in that, I think, in right, if you're like too far in levels above where they are, then right, you run the risk of like losing them, right? Not being able to have them see, right, so
Yeah.
many levels ahead. Yeah.
But um, I'll note that all levels are needed. So you are, if you're when you're moving up in levels, it's not that you're no longer able to hold like the vital role, vital level. So if something happens, you can immediately move up and down, but it's the ability to see more levels than, so you can always see more levels down, not necessarily see more levels up.
So, right, that points to a capacity, right? One
Mm.
of the capacities is we need to be able to see what levels people are operating at, right? And
Yeah,
be able to
just to,
recognize that and respond accordingly.
yeah, just to
Right.
kind of elaborate on the pattern, I think all three of us had in common, and the examples we were working on was kind of getting stuck in sensitive energy,
Mhm.
um, where maybe there's, for example, if there's we're dealing with somebody that's in a lot of automatic energy, we can listen to their perspective and try to be respectful, and we could even ask interesting questions and be kind and all that kind of stuff, but it's not enough to disrupt that automatic thinking, right? So there's no, it's not enough to change their level of energy.
Right. So the capacity I'm hearing in that is the ability to be able to ask disruptive questions in a way that, right, I would say maybe enlightened or informed disruptive questions, right?
Yeah. And we were
Um,
exploring that a little bit. Like, okay, so what does that, require of us to raise our level of energy up to conscious? And then how does that relate to the willingness to disrupt, right? The courage, the willingness to risk losing them or upsetting them or offending them, which we avoid. And also, how does that relate to kind of embracing the tension or the conflict, as you put it, between the activating and restraining forces?
Great. What else? What else came up for you? What else did you notice? Anything shifting in how you're holding your situation?
Do you guys notice any shift as we move from the individual to the pair to the trio as far as how the energy feels?
If it wasn't obvious, that was a conscious choice.
That's really interesting. I think, yeah, I do think there's probably a more of a tendency to get trapped in sensitive energy when there's it's just a pair, um, right? And that especially that kind of like observer role. I mean, that's kind of there's an obvious link to conscious energy there too. The third eye observer,
Mhm.
something naturally does kind of lift up in that pair, that the group of three. It seems like.
Anything else out of that breakout that wants to be shared?
I was just thinking, in the conversation Miguel and Danielle we had, we focused just on an issue Danielle was involved with. So we could have had a lot more time, would have been helpful perhaps in some ways, but you know, we've only got so long. But I think the thing that occurred to me also is about um, a sense of really what one's own role in the system is there, and where you're what authority, if you may have, to be able to ask some of these questions.
Mhm.
Particularly, I think in Danielle's case, that dealing with people who've been a lot of people who've been in an organization quite a long time, and she was relatively new to the job. Um, and that offers an opportunity, it seemed, to bring a fresh pair of eyes, a second, a wider seeing. But also, is what validity does that questioning have if that person is perceived in a minor role, or
Mhm.
not essential to the system, as it were?
Mhm.
And I'm not suggesting Daniel really aren't, but just that came up for me out of that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so it's not just, your own state of being in that process. It's actually, how you are perceived by others.
Yeah. Well, and for everybody in the group, right? An awareness of positionality and how that influences the conversation and the degree to which we do or don't have permission um, to be working in particular ways. Yeah, there's a lot rolled up into that, definitely. Mhm. Any other thoughts? We have one more little bit that we wanted to do today, and it's something a little different. We wanted to try this out, but I think we got another minute or so. If anybody has anything else I'd like to share. All right, Miguel.
All right. So um, here we're gonna take some time to reflect on some things, and so we're looking for you to pay attention to the quality of your attention. So how is this vibrating within you, and what are you noticing? So far we have been climbing, moving up the levels of energy, and the next exercise is um, it may not feel that we're going to climb further, but recognize that we have been already um, getting in touch with more some things that we uh, are not able to land. So at this point, the energy will not necessarily rise, but it will just be deeper. So we have been working on the second eye, the capacity to hold yourself and the larger purpose simultaneously, and the depth that comes from uh, that genuine binocular vision is sustained by the conscious energy. So stay in that for a moment, and then you'll notice something. The conscious energy still has center. So you're holding those two views, uh, your individual and the larger one, but there's still a I in that seeing. So you still haven't lost yourself. So the depth is real, but it's still perceived from a position. So it's like you're standing on top looking at something. So bring to mind a moment. It might be brief, it might be from years ago, not collapsed, not lost, not transcended in any dramatic sense. Just no longer the reference point. So a moment when you were in a conversation or in a place where there was no longer a you engaging with it, or a then there was only one field and you were one of its currents, indistinguishable from the whole that you were a part. And the field knew what it was becoming without anybody in particular having to know. Stay with that for a moment until it returns you with some texture. The quality of that attention, the way it felt dissolved but present, what you knew that you could not have known from inside the usual eye.
Maybe we could pause there and let people bring this experience to mind or image it. Everybody got something?
Right. So um, I hope you're able to get in touch with that moment, and I'll um, float a few questions for your further processing. So, what was happening in that moment that you have been treating ever since as an exception, when it in fact may be a glimpse of the order from which the most important work is actually done? And what would your practice look like if you organized it around becoming a better instrument? Sorry, not around becoming a better instrument, but around becoming progressively available to fields that already know what they're doing.
Can you say that again, Miguel, please?
So the first question is going back to the moment that you uh, reconnected with, what was happening in that moment that you have been treating ever since as an exception, when in fact it may be a glimpse of the order from which the most important work is actually done? And the second question, what would your practice look like if you organized it not around becoming a better instrument, but around becoming progressively available to the fields that already know what they're doing?
A lot more nervous system regulation is what's coming to mind for me.
So, in closing that thought, my invitation is to carry what came uh, to you, let it work on you between now and the next time we meet. Some of what just arrived is not yet ready to be spoken, and that is the work. Some of it will only land in you over time.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, so you're pitching this at Transcendent, yeah?
No, I was moving toward unitive,
Okay,
Mm.
not yet transcendent.
okay. I'm going a level too high.
Yeah.
It's all right, Tony. Go where it takes you. I think that's the
Well,
point of the exercise. Go where it
yeah.
takes
The ambition, yes.
you.
So
Mm.
the question for our us sharing this is: do you notice any shifts in the level of energy and or perspective that came up while doing that reflection?
Yeah, I think for me it was, would I be able to hold that? What would it take to really hold that all through that process? And is it something you can switch on and off? Or do you have to really go through some sort of, I don't know, process, ritual, whatever, to be able to take yourself out of the, perhaps, especially if it's you're applying it to work or projects you're working on, you know. So yeah, that's what came up for me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, for me, there was a clear kind of lifting of a burden, a weight. I think, and I think the way I understand that is it's the uh, it's the view that I have to do all this. That there's all this stuff I have to figure out how to do, and what's kind of opening up is no, there's already this energy at work in motion, and on this level, it's more about letting go of this idea that not only should I do, but that I can do, and letting that kind of work through me. And yeah, there's a lightness that I'm experiencing with that, which is very pleasant.
There's a lightness that you're bathed in right now, Tom. Do you see that?
That's just a coincidence.
I don't think so. There are no coincidences. Yeah, for me, it felt expansive and opening rather than, yeah, as not having to be the instrument, but just it's already there. The energetic field is already there. And so, because the instance I was thinking about was just this clear sort of operating from an energetic level and not a conscious level in that moment that happened for me that I was bringing to mind. And just what happened in the group was just amazing. And so it felt like just a sensing into the energetic field and responding from what was coming up there. And then as I was thinking about it, there's this bird that was just like singing the song right out the window. And it was just like, yeah, there you go. There it is. It's there. It doesn't have to be me. It's not me. Mm.
Anya and Danielle, I know that you guys are uh, not as familiar with the frameworks and the language and all that, but generally, how did that um, reflection land with you guys?
Yeah, I wrote down some words of like kind of how that feels, the quality of attention, and setting aside the energy framework for just a minute. But the just like what it's bringing up for me is like patience and like trust in the process, um, which is kind of almost a faith as well, and then calmness and steadfast, like. Um, I think that I tend to, in these situations, especially in work situations where there's like a business as usual process that is hard to disrupt, I often let go of the steadfast. Like I, I sometimes feel like a squeaky wheel or like uninvited
Mm.
voice, trying to get maybe the team to think on another energy level. But as and I get frustrated and just let it go. But I think like having some like steadfast energy that you bring to it that shows your level of like faith in that process, that like there is value in asking these questions, that just that way of being is more likely to get people's attention. Um, than kind of like continuing to sort of nag and push, like, yeah, but you're forgetting about this. And like, this is what we're really trying to do. Like, your project is not the project. They're not going to
Mm.
respond well to that. But if you can just like calmly, almost like a ninja, like quietly, I don't want to be sneaky, but like plant seeds, like those little acupuncture points that continue to get others to think a little differently, then they almost start to like acknowledge you as a source for that, so that
Mm.
when they are more open to it, maybe they come to you. So it's just like a like continual calm, steadfast energy that I feel is needed from myself.
The other thing I'm hearing what you're saying, Anya, is potentially it's a source of will for you, right? What helps to regenerate your will to engage in particular ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's coming up for me is a lot about surrender, um, and like trust not just in myself but in others, and kind of the knowing before words. I've um, I feel like sometimes when we put these ideas into packages of with words, with language, it restricts them. But like there is that energy field that you talked about. I think there is a common understanding is there, whether or not we're able to articulate it or not. And so I'm trying to remind myself to like sense sense into that as I'm in these group settings where we're meeting some resistance, restraining energy towards moving in a direction, and to not get swept away in that energy, but to continue to know that through that there's still common understanding and common energy, and yeah, what we feed stays alive.
Great. Well, we are a minute over time. So I think I assume Miguel's okay with this. I'm going to share the kind of ending meditation that Miguel offered us, and on the in a post in the circle community and share the recording and a bunch of stuff. So please, if you have any other reflections, anything that you're holding that like comes up later, feel free to include comments in the circle community. Our next session is going to be back on our regular time of the second Wednesday of the month. And the next one is going to be with Jody Smits Anderson, and we're going to be talking about co-creating indirectly. So yeah, as you go out into the world, remember to continue to engage in self-observing practices and transcendent experiences.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
Your graphic grid that you created, a
that's Miguel.
curiosity, Miguel. Yeah, I figured that's I love it. But I'm curious about why you didn't put one, why you didn't choose for it to be an ordering framework from lower to higher, like typical.
Why did it flip around?
Why did it flip
Because
around?
it was chronological, so we started
Okay,
um in time. So we started with the one, then we went to the two, and then went to the three.
thank you. That answers the question. I love today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. That's
Thanks.
great. Good
Thanks
to be
everyone
back.
for showing up. Yeah, great to see you again, Tony.
Yeah.
Great session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you all.
Everyone
appreciate it.
else,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
be well.